Good evening, lovely LIAF. As we wait for our distinguished panel to come and join me, don't be shy. I'm sure it's a shared emotion this evening that it's fantastic to be here. It's fantastic to have an event to remember Emma at the start of the festival. And it's amazing to see that film, but it's obviously with mixed emotions. But please do come and join us.
Is this working? Yeah. Can everybody who is involved in the last film stand up? Or don't be shy. Yeah, if you want to.
Oliver didn't stand up for anyone.
I just want to start really by saying who I am. My name is Jez Stewart. I have the great pleasure and privilege and boredom some days, but most days fantastic privilege of being a curator of animation at the British Film Institute. And before I sort of ask everybody their connection to Emma, I think I probably heard Emma first before I met her, being sat in an audience at an event like this, and there being an opportunity to ask questions, and then just sort of hearing some difficult, awkward, spot-on, perfect question being directed at the panel, and thinking, ooh, I'm glad I'm not being on the end of that one. I wonder going to ask, and who asked that one? And then getting to know Emma and meeting her at festivals and events like this, and being really excited to work with her on archiving her work in the BFI National Archive and the film. And then I'm extremely glad I didn't wear the same shirt this evening as I did on screen earlier when I looked very young, and I think I should probably throw that away. But I got to know her in many years up to sort of interviewing her shortly before she died. And so what I wanted to do to really start was to ask you all about, to sort of introduce yourselves and your first impressions of Emma, and then starting to get the connection you met to her. And if we can go through chronologically, Jed, am I right that you met her first? If you can talk about, introduce yourself and your connection to her.
Yeah, we met in 1977. We were both still teenagers, studying graphic design together. Emma was in one group, I was in the other. And we sort of became like a mutual appreciation society. We were sort of in slightly different friendship groups, but her work sort of stood out. It wasn't necessarily the best of commercial graphic design in those days, but there was a wit and a depth to it. I think the first thing I remember about Emma was we went on a trip, 6 or 7 of us, to the Victoria and Albert Museum, and we had to cross Exhibition Row, which is sort of 8 lanes of traffic, and the traffic lights were all down, so it was just impossible. And I just remember Emma walking out into the traffic and putting her hands up and shouting, "Stop!" and stopping this traffic like parting the Red Seas. I was just some oik down from the sticks in the big city, and I thought, wow, she's like amazing, cool character. And gradually over the next few years, we became friends and collaborators, and started Pearly Oyster Productions together. And yeah, I mean, if I go on too long, that'll be.
So who's next? Was it you, Julian, or Jonathan?
1982.
It would have been you next.
Was it 1982 when I met Emma? And we were students at the same time at the Royal College of Art. She was a year above me, I think. And I think she's probably like the first person I met from London, virtually, who was like London born and bred, and I was from the Midlands, and yeah, I thought she was. The first thing that struck me about Emma was this incredible confidence. It's a bit like what Jed was saying. It's just the newer way around, and she seemed to have everyone at the Royal College of Art sort of helping her with her work. And me and Sue Young had just come down from Liverpool, and we were we just felt like almost like a little bit sidelined by her, 'cause she was such this energy that she had that was sort of kind of just got everyone involved with stuff, and we just sort of sat in the corner and got on with our stuff. But we just became friends over the time, and we ended up hanging out, sort of like had a studios. We went to Shoreditch in the mid-'80s after I left the Royal College, and the studio next door to each other. Jed was there too, and just sort of were friends really on and off ever since. But like later on, we got a lot closer, I suppose, when we had kids at similar sort of times, and so we can end up. We never collaborated on anything really, but I don't think. But we did lots of stuff together, families as much as anything in the end.
And Julian, would you come?
She came to see me in 19...
Microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Emma, would be...
I know. No, 1978. Because Jim Whiting is in here, and he's played a very important part on how we got together. But he would put on a show at the Hayward, and I was helping. And those days I had red hair, well, copper-coloured hair, and she spotted me. And then over a period of the following 5 years, she spotted me several other times, and I spotted her, and we eventually got together in '85.
We'll come back. So, Fiona, would that be you next for Queen's Mind?
Yeah, I'm just slightly ahead of Coco. Because, so I met Emma, I hadn't quite yet graduated from Glasgow School of Art, so it was '95, and my tutor, Malcolm Kennard, also taught Jed and Emma at LCP, I think, and I'd started dabbling in animation, and he said, go and see Emma. So I went and saw Emma before I'd graduated, just for a chat in the Easter holidays, and I'd been on a trip to Prague, and I'd drawn, coincidentally, buildings that are reminiscent of the ones that ended up in the Queen's Monastery. So Emma kind of thought I might come in handy. But the funding and asked me to work on the Queen's Monastery, but the funding came through around the same time that Emma had Coco.
I was going to say, I was trying to...
Is that your... Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I could pass on to you, but yeah, so I worked with Emma, and she was just brilliant at... Well, I'm just grateful that she saw the potential, and working on the Queen's Monastery was a great experience, but then we kept in touch over the years. But yeah, so Coco turned up just at the same time, really, as the film started.
Yeah, because I was obviously going to make a joke saying I, first met her in the womb, but I was going to go on to saying, how I was born of the time of Queen's Monastery, and it was, she always used to like to tell me the story of when she was on the beach and she found out the same day that she was pregnant with me. Yeah. The same day that she got the funding. So it was like the day that she felt incredibly happy.
And so part of my job, I was her assistant, and I was doing all sorts of things, but using the rostrum camera, animating, watercolours, backgrounds, but also occasionally carrying Coco around if Emma had a bad back. But yeah.
So, Coco, I wasn't going to ask you when you first met her. That's obviously that. But in terms of, so for you, I was going to ask, when did you first sort of encounter that Emma was somebody who was sort of, celebrity, but she was in terms of the anime, and sort of that actually people sort of knew her and had this reputation.
Well, I feel like, well, the reality is my earliest memories are going to animation festivals. You know, I feel like I spent a lot of my childhood getting traipsed around, sitting in cinemas, and then and then getting given coffee to stay up late. And then the joke is my friend couldn't even bring her baby in, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I grew up as a baby in animation, yeah. So it was just life. I don't think it's one of those ones when you're a child, it's just your reality in that moment.
Okay, so we move on in terms of the films, and we'll come to House of Love later, but we've seen a range of different films across the programme, from the 1981, the first film, up into sort of Beware of Trains. Like I say, we'll come back to House of Love. I'd like you all to sort of talk about a film that you have a particular sort of reaction to, or a memory of, or emotion of. And if you could all like pick a different film, it would be awesome for the audience as a moderator, but you don't have to, and we can pick up on some other things. But if anyone wants to sort of chop in with a film that you think sort of has a particular meaning, or you have some insight in terms of its production, that please do, and sort of share some of the things around it.
I'll talk about Madame Potato, because without Madame Potato, without Madame Potato and without Emma, I would never have become an animator. I'd left, we'd left the LCP in 1980, and Emma had gone to the Royal College. And I'd sort of just signed on the dole, really, and sat around, and I had a little band called the Abstractions, and the idea of that band was international stadium rock stardom. And I don't quite know how we had this idea, because we couldn't write international stadium rock star songs. But Emma used to come and see us. There was another guy called Alex who was a student with us and was in our early studios. And Emma, when she'd talk about the Abstractions, she'd always say, they were so good. So she told us, and Ged was a brilliant frontman, and we were not really very good, and I was not a brilliant frontman. But what Emma spotted, although she never really, she never said this to me, but I think what she'd spotted was that what we had was weird little tunes and weird little songs that were perfect for animation. I think that's really what happens. So she sort of roped me into, or asked me really to write a soundtrack for Madame Potato. And the entire budget, studio, musicians, it was £40. And I brought it in £5 under budget. I mean, unfortunately, you can hear that I brought, from the sound quality, you can hear that I brought it. You're probably surprised it cost £35. And I just, as I was working on that, and when I saw the film, I thought, this is like what I've been looking for. I wanted to tell stories, but I'd never liked comic strips and never liked comics, and so suddenly it sparked in my head, and I started to do animation myself and started to work on my own film, and then we formed Perliosa Productions, and it went from there. And we would. It would sort of our creative relationship would range from cherry blossom and goldfish across to two weasels fighting in a bucket in the course of an afternoon. She drove me fucking bonkers, but I miss her terribly.
Anyone else? If we could talk about another film. I mean, Fiona, obviously you had a big involvement with the Queen's Monasteries. Could you talk a little bit about the sort of the origin of that and the sort of the artwork and the technique? 'Cause I remember her talking a little bit about being in the studio and sort of doing these drippy paintings and all kind of coming out of that.
Well, I turned up after Emma had come up with the idea, and there's an interesting. I know that the very early beginnings of it started when Emma was helping produce Kings of Siam, Jed's film. And as she was clearing the brushes at the end of the day, she would sort of make these dabs of inky colour in her sketchbooks and turn those into characters. And they were the origins of things that then became the Queen's Monastery. But there were just lots of what Emma always referred to as her dream project. And lots of things aligned, and there were lots of brilliant coincidences of things that Emma imagined as she was hearing the music that all linked up with the origins of the composer's thoughts and things that were inspired it, like there were monkeys and images to do with war. But by the time I came along to Pearly Oyster, all of that had been planned. So I was just there. So I was her assistant. And along with Julian, who did all his amazing architectural drawings for the backgrounds, I was then drawing them, every single one, on every single frame, even though computers were around then. But I hope you all agree that it was worth it. So the thing is, because I'm always amazed how short the film is. It's only just over 6 minutes. And I was at Pearly Oyster for almost 2 years working on it, I think, with Emma. But she decided not to get a vast crew, but you can see there were quite a few other people who worked on it who might be in the audience, actually. But I feel just really grateful that Emma decided to keep it a small crew, and we would just, paint away. So individual frames of watercolour.
We found the box.
We found the box of her favourite ones, and I sort of couldn't believe I drew the things I'd drawn, but I did, apparently. But, so it was Ged in his room, and me and Emma in our room listening to Radio 4 and chatting and drawing away quite happily. But Emma gave me a lot of responsibility, and that's what Emma, I think a lot of people talk about that Emma sees potential in people and gets them to do stuff. And got me to do things I didn't think I could do, and just trusted me with a lot of things.
And I really want to get to sort of Beware of Trains, because I think that Emma did a lot for sort of Nag talked about at the start, but some of the advocacy for funding in animation, and the fact that there ended up being this BFI short animation fund, and that Emma was ready, and then she came in and did this amazing pitch for the film. And it's an extraordinary film, isn't it? It's just so much depth. I wonder if anybody wants to talk a little bit about the origin of Beware Trains, or the impression that you had first seeing it.
Well, yes, I mean, I'll do it again, sorry. I mean, the film came out of dreams. And it came out of dreams 20 years before the film was actually made. And it went through a number of different forms, and it was reimagined a number of times. And I saw that development through the years, and that was extraordinary. I mean, it was 20 years of development. And finally, when the money came through, which was, I think a week before the lockdown, when the lockdown should have happened anyway, but that's another story. And all through the pandemic, we were making it in the yard in Brixton, our base yard, which you see, some of which in the little documentary. But what was, I think, particularly brilliant, I mean, for me, because, I was, when I met Emma, she was working, when we got together, she was working on Springfield, and she got me to animate dots going round in a circle on the dresses, because that, that's something I could do. But over the years, I'd always sort of tried to keep my work separate because, well, various reasons. But with Beware of Trains, we were all stuck. So I became director of photography. I took all the model photographs. I was involved in every aspect of the production. And I genuinely saw the magic happen. I mean, maybe if I can explain, we had a team, and the team that worked on House of Love were basically the same team. And they would come in every week, and Emma was very strict about everybody being paid properly, and they did their 7.5 hours a day, no further work, they had to go home. But then over the weekend, she kept on working. She was working early and late. And over the weekends, there was the way that material was put together from that week. It really was magic. I mean, some of the transformations came together in those times. And it was in that being able to be so close to working on it, which was lovely, really, really, really brilliant. But then also seeing the magic close up and still not really understanding where it came from. That was very special.
It's an extraordinary film. Coco, we should get to you and House of Love. Tell us a bit about sort of the origins of that, and then you sort of take the direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where did that go?
Well, if you knew Emma always had, lots of projects on the go, just like obviously how Beware of Trains took a long time to go. She did loads of other work in that time. But she, over the years, as you can see, if you didn't get a chance to look before, afterwards there's a little exhibition with all these strips. And also all these strips are made a lot using old stencils that she would then turn into all these different characters. And that was kind of the beginning. And she kind of did some over the years. And then she did a lot more recently. And it was when she knew she wasn't well, she wanted to do another film. And she was thinking, what could she do that was easy, that she could do by herself, and also just because she loved working, as we all know. So that's kind of why it kind of derived into that project. And also, you'll realise they're so tiny. So obviously that makes life a little bit easier. Saying that, obviously, me with the team, Luke, Sophia, Kate have been amazing. Oliver did the music. So it was, and obviously Ged and Julian worked, Harriet, producer. But it was a coming together. Emma left strict instructions to some extent of how to finish the film. But she did, within the film that you saw, there was about 3.5 minutes of her actual animation. I think there's the actual black box is out there. The one where she drops is on one of the strips, fully animated. And if you just go and see how small it is, I think it's really very small.
The art.
But yeah, so yeah, it was.
Do go and look out there.
Yeah.
Just to finish, but please do think of some questions. Going to come to you shortly. But Jonathan, you've done a lot of sort of teaching and things like that. What do you think is sort of Emma's legacy for sort of the example that you would have that coming out of it, and that you might share with students and the audience and beyond?
Well, I think the thing about Emma was most of her career, she didn't have much money to work with, but that never stopped her. She had a couple of films that had okay budgets, but she just used to make amazing stuff with stuff that she picked up in the street or on the edge of the river or wherever really, and rubbish, and she collected stuff that other people would overlook. And but she was just like completely dedicated to what she was doing, and completely true independence. She never sold out. I don't know if she ever did a commercial or anything like that. She somehow managed to just keep doing her own.
She did.
She did a
sorry.
number of commercials.
Sorry, she did a few commercials, but so she did sell out then. But no, I always see her as just completely just dedicated to doing her own stuff and never giving up, really. Even like when death is staring her in the face, she just like determined to just keep going. And I think that's the thing that I think I would say to anyone who's starting out, who's unsure about their future, is just don't give up and just keep going and believe in yourself, because that's what Emma did, really. And she was just like, she had that gift in a way of just being able to believe in herself, and that's very hard, but she did it. And even the bad things she made into good things. You know, as she said at one point that some of the best work she did was when she was feeling shit, and that's something that I would pass on to people, really. That
She once said to me, "Life's too short to be happy."
But there was lots of happiness as well.
Yeah, I
And a
think
lot of play and joy. It's that, the two worlds. And I also, what you said, Jonathan, everyone, she did have an amazing confidence and presence. But I think it's important to remember, just like everybody, she did have doubt. Just most of you didn't hear it. I heard quite a lot of it.
we heard them.
But my point
I
is,
heard
like,
a lot of it.
of course, it's that inner thing of keeping going. But you have days where you aren't, and I think that's, you can't glorify that it was easy every day, because it wasn't.
And also, she was very active in pursuing forms of funding. She didn't just moan about not having any money. She went out and collaborated. I mean, I was just reading something just the other day that when Channel 4 and BBC Bristol stopped commissioning animation films in the 1990s, she got together with other people, the Animation Alliance, and campaigned. And, she was one of the people that ended up going to, Downing Street and lobbying MPs in Parliament to gain the credibility of animators and animation that it deserved. And, it took 20 years or something from those early campaigning, about the millennium. But the funding came through. The people in the room here, I'm sure, who know all about that.
Yeah, there could always be a bit more of it. Would be quite nice. But just before we just go to the question, I do think on that sort of that one of the things when we did an event with Martin at the Garden Cinema about Emma last year, I sort of sat on the panel and I said that I did some interviews with her before when she knew she was unwell, talking about her early career, and she sort of said how she just didn't want to be forgotten, and what I didn't say at that panel, and what I really hope that she understood, and I sort of said that she isn't. I mean, look at us all here on the opening night of the London International Animation Festival, and that we're all here to remember her and the work. And I hope she really knew quite how much she meant to everybody, and I'm sure she did, and I hope she did. And in terms of doubt, and she was an extraordinary lady, an extraordinary body of work. Do we have any questions? We have not a huge amount of time, so just if you can be amazingly concise and polite and neat, and stick your hand up, and then there is a roving mic. Or we may have covered absolutely everything, and you're desperate for. We're right over here. So.
Oh yeah, no, I think one of the things that, yes, I'll talk about the figure skating. Emma was incredibly determined person. And quite where this came from, I don't know, but it was trained in her by her parents. I mean, her father used to get her to sort of stand on his hands above her head. And, you know, she used to tell me how she used to be able to walk round the playground on her hands. She was determined and, you know, very, very strong physically. And she got a taste for ice skating. I mean, she grew up in Holland Park and ended up skating at the ice rink, you know, near, I can't remember where it is now. Yeah, Westway.
Then they moved to Stratton, and she.
Yeah, then she went straight. But she was very determined. I mean, her father was very, had been a sort of a bodybuilder in the sort of 30s, and her mother was a very good swimmer, and they'd met at a swimming lake near Bristol. So this sort of physical strength was really important. And the skating all through her teens, until she ended up going to art college, was spent going, I mean, I was just sort of telling the story again, that she'd be, you know, Fridays during the week, she wouldn't do sports at school, she went skating. But then on Friday evenings, she'd come back, have supper, go to sleep for a couple of hours, then go skating all night, you know, like 5-6 hours. Then come back and wake up all her friends who'd been sleeping while she'd been skating and go down Portobello Road, as you would. And this rigorous, I would say, you know, almost obsessive training. I mean, I don't know, I have to be careful here, because that to be a good animator, you do have to be obsessive. And she was. But she was trained in that obsessive nature, you know, really, really intensely trained. And therefore, everything else that life threw at her, you know, was tough and, you know, but it was all just something to get over. It wasn't, you know, she didn't let any of that get her down. I mean, she got depressed, you know, everybody gets a bit low sometimes, but she was able to fight through it. And I think that whether it was in her own work, whether it was in commissioned work, which she did do quite a lot of commissioned work, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, but also through her own work. And it's that determination is something that I think is really, really important in thinking about what kept her working.
And I think that ties to the theme of the programme, the idea of fierce and independent to the end. And I think we will draw it to a close there, because I know that many of you are going to come back in this evening. But I'd just like you to all give a massive round of applause and thanks to Julian, Ged, Jonathan, Coco, Fiona. Enjoy LIAF.
Sorry, keep the spirit of that determination. We are founding the Emma Calder Foundation. And the Emma Calder Foundation will be based around Pearly Oyster. And we've all been giving out badges. And the little face of the woman is the center point of Pearly Oyster. And Pearly Oyster was the company that set up with Jed back in the 80s and carried on. And we are going to be reaching out to all of you for ideas of things that we can do. We've got lots of ideas already, but we're going to pursue that. And as a fitting end, I'd like to call out for 3 cheers for Emma Calder. Hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip.